President Biden withdraws his ATF director nominee after a series of exclusive reports from the Reload, and an interview with VCDL President Philip Van Cleave. That and more on this episode of the Weekly Reload Podcast.
I made the devil run. I gave him poison just for fun.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Stephen Gutowski. I'm the host of the Weekly Reload Podcast and the founder of thereload.com. I'm here with contributing writer Jake Fogelman to talk a little bit about this week's news. We're going to start with the biggest news of the week, I think, which was that President Biden withdrew his ATF nominee after a series of exclusive stories were published in the Reload about allegations he had made racist comments while working in the ATF's Detroit division, and that a black agent had accused him of trying to effectively end his career by alleging he'd cheated on a promotion assessment. The agent claims that essentially Chipman had a racial motivation for making that complaint, and also that the investigation that followed exonerated him from Chipman's allegations, and he was effectively cleared, but his career had been sidetracked for several years at that point, and he retired shortly after that. The DOJ had confirmed that Chipman did initiate a investigation into an agent during his career. The DOJ did not give details on anything else beyond the existence of the investigation. They didn't say what the outcome was. The agent obviously claimed he was cleared, and they wouldn't release the investigation either to the Reload or to Congress. Senator Grassley has requested a copy of it from the Office of Inspector General, who carried out the investigation at the time. But either way, these stories damaged his chances at the nomination, and now the president has pulled him after failing to get even 50 Democratic votes. They didn't need support from any of the Republicans. They only needed the Democratic caucus to get him through, and they could not accomplish that, and decided to pull him this week. So, Jake, you wrote a little bit about what the White House is saying now, what they said about this decision, what they said about Chipman. Can you give us a little bit of a rundown on what they're saying?
Sure. So a couple hours after the news broke that he was likely going to have his nomination pulled, the White House released a statement where the president, essentially stood by Chipman, lavished praise, saying he had a great career in the ATF, had the support of law enforcement, would have been a great ATF director, but he was pulling him anyway. And he proceeded to blame Republicans and the gun industry for his demise, essentially saying the Republicans did everything they could, stood in lockstep to block this nomination. He didn't acknowledge the fact that a couple of senators, as you pointed out, on his own side were uncomfortable with the nomination. Yeah,
Angus King would be one of the key dissenters. He's an independent from Maine, but he caucuses with Democrats. And you also had Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema,
possibly Tester,
John Tester as well.
Yeah.
So that, it was really the issue was with getting Democrats on board. But you're right, the president did blame Republicans, who all came out publicly against Chipman's nomination, which was sort of a rare show of total unity on a nominee.
Even the moderate Republicans, like Susan Collins, was one of the first ones to come out and say she was not going to vote for Chipman. So, yeah, after the White House's statement, Jen Psaki gave a press conference where she was asked, kind of to reiterate the president's thoughts on the matter. And she pointed out that they're actually looking for another role for Chipman, possibly in the administration. So this might not be the last we've seen of David Chipman.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see where they try to put him. They've said they don't want to create a gun czar, as some of these gun control groups have pushed for in the past, this sort of cabinet level, but not Senate confirmed position. The president says he doesn't want to do that, but he's going to find some other role for Chipman, which is interesting because there's all these unresolved questions about his past, and especially these allegations that he made racist remarks and torpedoed effectively a black agent's career. There's still a lot we don't have answers for. The DOJ denied in a statement to the Reload that Chipman has any sort of racial bias, And they claim that he had 2 complaints filed against him. One, we believe, is related to the allegation of racist comments in Detroit. And the DOJ said that those complaints were found to be meritless, but we don't have any, we don't have a copy of the complaints. We aren't able to see what was actually alleged in writing. We don't see why he was cleared, why they were judged to be meritless. We don't have a copy of the investigation into the agent that Chipman initiated. There's a lot that hasn't been fully answered on all of these things. And so it'll be interesting to see if anyone else, frankly, outside of conservative media or at the Reload or takes any interest in this. They haven't so far. They've kind of, buried the story. Occasionally it's been mentioned in passing in some of the major outlets, but there's been very little follow-up on it. And it's almost as though it doesn't matter whether any of this is true to some of the people covering this story, which is disconcerting to me, frankly. I would like to know if this person who's going to be put into a government position has a bias against African Americans or not. He hasn't even come out and made any statements denying any of this. Neither has the White House, frankly. The DOJ has on his behalf, I guess, but he's been silent, hasn't answered any questions, and we haven't seen the core documents at the center of all this stuff. So,
and to that point, when the White House was giving that statement, they weren't even asked about the comments. Just the fact that a lot of these media outlets didn't pick up the story that we were covering kind of allows that to happen. They never had to answer for those questions, especially even now that they're planning for a future role for him in the federal government.
Yeah, it's pretty concerning. But there's also the question of what happens now with the ATF director nominee. And I have a piece over at the Reload, a member exclusive piece. By the way, if you join thereload.com, not only will you get access to member exclusive pieces like this one, but you'll get the podcast a day early. So make sure you go over to thereload.com and check out some of our membership options. But in that piece, I discuss, what's the path forward for the White House. Now that they've pulled Chipman, it's difficult actually to see how they're going to get another opportunity to get someone confirmed in the president's first term. And obviously, he's not guaranteed to have a second term and get another opportunity like this. Because the problem is, and I expound a lot more on this in the piece, but the problem is, now that they've withdrawn Chipman, best case scenario is they have some sort of deal already worked out with Angus King. I keep mixing up those two. I did this on Cam Edwards' show too. But Angus King, the senator from Maine, maybe they have some deal worked out with him and the other moderates for a replacement candidate. I know that a source told me that when King met with the White House, he presented at least 2 names for consideration. And both of those are, one is the current acting director, Richardson, and another one is a former acting director from 2019. And so he's putting forth these sort of career ATF guys who don't have the same sort of explicit work with gun control groups that Chipman had, and as of now don't have the same kinds of questions about his character that were raised by former ATF agents in the Reload pieces. Because it also went beyond, obviously, the racial aspect. A lot of these guys were concerned about his temperament and that he might retaliate against agents who don't share his point of view on gun control, and that his adversarial stance towards the industry could actually harm the ability of the agency to carry out its main mission of arresting criminals who traffic in guns or try to buy guns. But, even if they have this deal where they've got another nominee already in mind who's more palpable to some of these moderate Democrats, it's going to be difficult to get anyone through the process before the end of this year, especially given all the other things that they have coming up, like the debt limit, the budget, the big spending bill that they're still fighting over. There's a lot of things that are going to be on the Senate's calendar that aren't movable for something like an ATF nominee. And then you're getting into an election year in 2022, which just makes moderate Democrats less likely to want to talk about this issue at all, let alone vote on an actual nominee, unless they're far less controversial than David Chipman was. And then the problem with that is, if you find a less controversial nominee than David Chipman, are they going to be somebody that the gun control groups who employed and pushed Chipman are actually excited about, like that they're going to be happy with?
Right.
Because I don't think that's a guarantee at all. And so you're stuck in this catch-22 situation, and then you have to rely on the midterms being better for Democrats than everyone expects them to be. Not only holding the Senate, but probably gaining a seat or two, so they can make this path to 50 easier. And that's where, like, you get into territory of thinking maybe there's no real opportunity to appoint somebody that's going to actually get through at all in the first term before the next presidential election. And obviously if he wins re-election and they have a big year, that's just so far off in politics, it might as well be 100 years into the future.
Exactly.
But, you know, that's what they feel like they need to get what they actually want.
Right.
So, you know, there's a lot going on with the Chipman nomination. And, you know, I also should say, just real quick, that this is exactly why the Reload exists. This is why I founded it, to report these kinds of stories that other people were either unwilling or unable to report. I haven't seen any other outlets, from the New York Times to the Washington Post to Politico, CNN, whoever you'd name, Fox News included, that have been able to actually get ATF agents to talk to them about any of this. It's remarkable. And, you know, to me, that's either because they're not trying as hard as they might with a Donald Trump nominee or a George Bush nominee, or it's because they simply don't have the same kind of sourcing that we do. Either way, I think it shows how important the Reload is in the grand scheme of things, and what we can really accomplish here, even though we're frankly a tiny outlet that's entirely funded by our readership. So I just think that's important to note. Like, this is where the Reload has real impact. This is how much what we do can influence things that happen at the highest levels of government. This is only the second nominee that Joe Biden has had to pull from consideration. And it's difficult, it's impossible to look at the situation and think that the Reload stories had no effect on that, because I think it's plainly obvious that they had a significant effect, even without the additional coverage from other major media outlets. So I just figured I want to say that. And obviously we have a lot of other things that happened this week. You know, this was the most important thing, so I wanted to commit, you know, a significant amount of time to it. But we also had, Jake did a great piece on the pistol brace ban, which the comment period ended on this week, right, Jake? What day did it end?
Yeah, Wednesday at midnight it ended.
And how many comments did get published to that?
A little over 209,000 comments, which
right.
is, and as they've acknowledged, some of the highest comments they've ever had on a federal rule change. So it's a pretty big deal.
Absolutely. And you were able to get the ATF to give you comment on that situation and tell you what's next for the rulemaking process there, where things go from here, which people can head over and read. That's obviously a huge story that's going to potentially impact millions of gun owners in America who own AR-15s with pistol braces and other firearms. Then we also had Dick Heller filed a new lawsuit of Heller v. DC fame from the landmark Supreme Court case. He is now going after the city over its ban on ghost guns, which is actually really a ban on all manufacturing of firearms, even if you're licensed by the federal government to do so, which we wrote about that as well. Got an exclusive comment from Heller himself in the piece, which I don't believe any other outlet has either. Same for the ATF comment on the brace piece. So, there's a lot of stuff happened this week. It's just the tip of the iceberg. But the Chipman stuff was the most important, but there was really a lot going on, and we covered it all. And in fact, there was also a lawsuit, a defamation lawsuit filed by the Virginia Citizens Defense League against the Coalition to Stop Gun Violence over this labeling of the gun group as a domestic terror organization, which we actually now are going to go over to my interview with the head of the VCDL about this situation, as well as the Virginia governorship race, which is heating up right now. This is an off-year election, and it's one that has a lot of consequences, most likely for gun owners in Virginia. So we're going to discuss all that with Philip Van Cleave here next. So make sure you stay tuned. I'm here with Philip Van Cleave, who's the president of the Virginia Citizens Defense League. Philip, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and the organization?
Yeah, the Virginia Citizens Defense League was formed back in late 1994 at a time in Virginia when you had to beg permission to get a concealed carry permit. And some people couldn't get them at all, others could get them easily. It was just unfair. So that's what we formed, and that's what we basically got overturned the very first year. That was quite a victory.
Sure.
So we are we not only lobby the General Assembly to protect our gun rights, we also are a watchdog. If local government or the state government decides to do something that's unconstitutional or attack our gun rights or do something illegal, we get involved, including lawsuits if necessary. And we're also an educational organization. Our members really understand gun rights, firearms in general, the whole bit. Our focus is gun rights and nothing else.
Sure, certainly. And obviously you're a grassroots organization, and you've been working in Virginia for the last almost 30 years now, right? Has it been that long, since the 90s, since 94? I guess I feel kind of old. But so we wrote about a new lawsuit that you guys filed the other day. It's actually a defamation lawsuit filed against the Coalition to Stop Gun Violence because they labeled your group a domestic terror organization in several press releases, I believe is the claim here. I've reached out to them for comment, and they didn't respond. Although I was able to find a cached version of one of their initial press releases that did contain the phrase that you're taking issue with, obviously, and then the current version that's on their website now has that phrase has been removed. So obviously something has happened to do that. Have you heard anything back from them yet in this case?
No, I haven't heard a peep yet. They have until the 18th, so they still got a few more, another week or so to respond. They put that in their press release. There was at least one paper that I know of that published that as is, including the defamatory language. So we put something in our alert system, which the other side monitors. We know that they monitor, we don't care. But they saw that we picked up on that and that was indeed a real problem. And so, lo and behold, the next day the wording magically changed. But we'd already gotten copies of it. It's out. Like I say, another publication had put it out as was written by them. So it's a little too late to be. The damage has been done.
And obviously, I guess it should be clear to make clear here: the VCDL has never been involved in any sort of violence or advocated for violence of any sort, and has never been labeled a domestic terror organization by any law enforcement group, anything like that. Correct?
No, we have law enforcement members. We have, people with security clearances. We're a slice of America. No, we've never had. In fact, our relationship with police departments has been outstanding. We've certainly worked with the Capitol Police, Fairfax Police, Richmond Police. We've coordinated with them. We're very much an organization that believes in law and order and rights, and we've had zero problems because that's how we are. We're not expecting to have any problems. We try to be careful.
Mm-hmm. And I suppose that's why you're concerned by these comments from the Coalition to Stop Gun Violence.
Yeah, we had some of our members saying, well, if you're classified as a domestic terror organization, I've got a security clearance. I can't be affiliated with that if that were true. Same thing with police officers and so forth. Yeah, that's caused grief amongst our membership. Mm-hmm. And it's the attempt is to damage our credibility when we fight our fights in the courts and in the General Assembly.
Sure. And now, obviously, you guys are not new to this sort of situation. You filed a defamation lawsuit against Katie Couric back a couple years ago over her documentary where she took some of your members out of context by editing in a period of silence that made them appear as though they didn't have an answer to one of her questions. However, obviously that suit didn't succeed. So why do you think this one will, especially, given how difficult it is to actually succeed with a defamation lawsuit in court?
Well, it's sort of apples and oranges in how those two suits are and what happened in both cases. In the first case with Katie Couric, it was a matter of editing in, as you mentioned, total silence where we actually had a response to a question she asked. It looked like we were dumbfounded. And so that gave the wrong impression. And now you're into impressions and other things. It's just very different than somebody coming out and saying that we are a domestic terror organization. When you do that, it's a whole different world. It might be one thing if I said, well, I don't know, I think Stephen Gutowski, I don't know, he looks like a criminal type to me, as far as I'm concerned. That'd be very different than me saying Stephen Gutowski was involved in a rape in Louisiana in 2002.
Right.
That's a very different world. Now you've been accused of something that could cost you your family, cost you your job. Otherwise I'm just pontificating. People ignore other people's pontifications, but you state something like that as fact. And that's in essence what they've done to us.
Okay.
Very different than the moment of silence that they put in, that Katie Couric put in.
Sure. But obviously, that these cases are very difficult to win generally, even with statements of fact like you're talking about here. Oftentimes, especially when you're dealing with an organization like Coalition to Stop Gun Violence, which is very hyperbolic in how it puts out its press releases. Oftentimes it seems to me I'm not an expert in the field, so I don't want anyone to take anything definitive from what I'm saying here. But my observations of these sorts of suits is that they oftentimes will fail even when the facts are sort of indisputed. Like, obviously you are not a domestic terror organization in any sort of factual sense of that label. But, you see this a lot with media figures being sued for making outrageous statements about other people. With VCDL being a well-known public group, the standard is so high in those cases that it can be very difficult to meet it and actually get a result. Although, I suppose you can also get results without getting a judgment in your favor, I guess would be another thing. I mean, they've already taken out the language that you're upset about, so they've had some effect already. But yeah, I guess.
But that has no legal effect. Right. The courts have ruled a while back that making a correction like that, it's not something you can use against an organization, nor can they use it in their favor. The example given to me was if somebody was walking on your sidewalk and they tripped and they broke their leg, because you had a stone out of place, a paver or something, and they sued you over that, and you went and fixed the paver. Well, the courts want you to fix the problem so somebody else doesn't have it, but they don't want to, in order to encourage you to do that, they don't want to penalize you and say, oh, see, he fixed that paver. He knew it was the problem. Oh, nor do they want to give you an advantage to say, well, I fixed it, the case is over now. So they just say it's neutral. It's good that you fixed it. Doesn't help you, doesn't hurt you. But
certainly,
that's
certainly you recognize that the bar is high in these situations, but you're confident.
But we went to somebody that's a specialist in this, and they definitely thought we should move forward with it.
Okay, and so what's the next step? They have until the 18th to respond, and then the case moves forward from there.
Yeah, well, basically we look at their response, and then I guess we respond to their response, and from there, I guess it's really going to be a matter then of scheduling, getting a court date set, and we're requesting a jury.
Okay, and this is in Fairfax County, Virginia, right?
Yes.
Civil court.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Great. Well, we'll stay on top of that for sure here at the Reload to see what comes of this case. I think it'll be interesting to follow, certainly. But another interesting area where you guys are involved is in the Virginia elections, which are coming up right now, because Virginia has off-year elections, and they tend to favor the party that's out of power as far as the presidency goes, which would be Republicans in this case. And you've got obviously Glenn Younkin is sort of a newcomer. He hasn't run for statewide office before. He's running for governor against Terry McAuliffe, who obviously was the previous governor before Ralph Northam. Now, you guys, interestingly, your PAC, your Political Action Committee, has not endorsed Glenn Younkin to this point. Why is that?
Glenn has not returned a survey. We have a survey that we send out to all candidates, and we then tabulate the results. But we have had a fixed rule forever that said, if you don't do a survey, you cannot get an endorsement from the PAC. We need to have solid information on your beliefs and where you would take us. We've got to know that. And the NRA was in the same boat. That's exactly the reason they listed why they didn't endorse him. And just like them, I believe we're going to be have endorsed the other two candidates on the ticket.
Which level? The lieutenant governor and the attorney general.
Lieutenant governor and attorney general, yeah.
And who are those candidates in this case?
Delegate Miyares is running for attorney general, and my mind just went blank. The lady running for lieutenant governor. Sorry,
it's okay. I can't remember her name off the top of my head either. But the Republican in the race, correct?
Yeah. Yes, they're both Republicans.
Right. And now, obviously, Terry McAuliffe is staunchly pro gun control and has supported as governor even confiscation of firearms, is like the AR-15 from Virginians. So presumably you are quite opposed to him winning the election.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's no doubt that he totally opposed, and he's already showed us what he can do.
Right.
So we're totally opposed to that. The problem is you end up with this what I would call a lack of enthusiasm factor, where, for example, Glenn Younkin can say, "Well, I'm better than Terry McAuliffe," and I have no doubt that would be the case. It would be hard not to be better than Terry McAuliffe. But what you lack is enthusiasm. Where gun owners would say, "Wow, did you see what Younkin believes in? Can you see how he would, whatever the issue would be, they could then be excited about it. Geez, I can't wait to tell my friends. I can't wait to get out and vote for this guy because we really need him." As opposed to, well, he's better than the other guy. Yeah, you'll get the vote, but you're not going to get the enthusiasm, which in turn could mean that you won't get as many votes as you could have.
Yeah.
So that's the problem.
Yeah.
And it's been done before and not successfully, where the base was kind of left hanging on things like that. You really need your base. You may be trying to reach out further to other things, but you can't lose your base while you're doing it.
You seem very popular today. You got a lot of
the phones,
notifications. I imagine it's a very busy time right now for VCDL.
And by the way, it's Winsome Sears. I don't know why I just said that she's the Republican running. Yes, for lieutenant governor. My mind went blank. Winsome Sears, a very, very, very nice black lady that I've known for quite a while, and she's really sharp, and she's very, very strong on gun rights.
Great, yeah. And you obviously, as you just articulated here, you think that lack of endorsement from groups like your group, your PAC, and the NRA will have a tangible effect on the race. I mean, what do you think that Younkin is trying to, triangulate a position where he's not actively angering gun owners, but also isn't courting them? Because perhaps that he views that as
I think he's trying to kind of. It may be a situation where he thinks the gun owners are going to vote for him, and therefore he can lie low on that and try to push some other issues that might be of interest. I don't know. That's, like I say, if that's the case, it's been tried before, and not successfully.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't know. I wish he would just simply fill out the survey. That would make life a lot easier for everybody, but I don't think he's going to do it.
What do you see as far as the rest of the election goes for the House of Delegates and the Senate? Where what's your feeling in those races? Obviously, Democrats have a thin majority in both chambers right now. They have control of the governorship. If Republicans take back just a single house or the governorship, presumably that will prevent a lot of the kinds of policies that Democrats attempted to pass. Although, I mean, even with full control, they weren't able to pass some of the most extreme policies that they had pushed for. And actually, the delegate who put up the assault weapons ban, the AR-15 confiscation bill, lost his reelection in a primary.
Yes. Yeah, we were celebrating that one.
So what's your long view on this? How do you think the election is shaping up right now?
Well, gun owners are fed up. I mean, they have really pushed us, stepped on us, kicked us. They had to backpedal on their agenda, but they still put in a whole bunch of stuff that's doing nothing for crime. Crime has been going up. We knew it would. They're meddling with gun rights. They should not do that. So gun owners are fed up. A lot of people are fed up in all different directions, but gun owners are particularly. Everybody has been paying attention to this. They're tired of it. So, and the other thing that's interesting is the Republicans have somebody running in every single House seat. I don't think they've ever done that before. Every one of the Democrats is being challenged. And this was something that caused a lot of anger, I guess, amongst gun owners last time around, that there were like 40 Democrat seats, I forget what the number was, that were unopposed. It was like, well, now we're telling people, if you've got somebody that historically has been horrible on guns, and you've been stuck with them, there was nobody running against them, you now have somebody to vote for. You now have the opportunity to go to the polls and vote for somebody else. And if enough of you are fed up with this, it could produce some turnaround. So I guess, as you say, Democrats, and it's not that we're partisan here, but the fact is that it's hard to find a Democrat right now. They've all basically, like a bunch of lemmings, have turned into a bunch of gun control people. Didn't used to be that way. You have one Democrat in the House that had a 100% voting record. she stands alone by herself. That's Delegate Tyler. The next best one was at 50%, and all the rest of them, as far as gun rights voting, they were down in a single digit or even zeros. While the Republicans, the vast majority of Republicans, had a 100% voting record on guns. So it's a divide that, in this case, the Democrat Party is putting forward. We're not imagining it; they're doing it, and that's why they're not getting endorsements, because the PAC would be happy to endorse a Democrat if they were standing up for gun rights. They have done that in the past, but boy, not this time around.
What about some of these Democrats in the Senate who blocked, the assault weapons ban, for instance? What's VCDL's feeling?
They're up for election in 2 years, and we'll see how that goes. But yeah, the Senate still has some Democrats that are not 100% on board with gun control. And in fact, as you said, they worked together with the Republicans to block more attacks on our right to defend ourselves. And they played an important role, and they will continue to. So these elections are critical. November 2nd, if the gun owner sits this out, then basically, I don't want to hear from him that there's a problem. You need to get out and vote. And we have early voting that's starting up. Well, that's something the Democrats wanted, and I think we, gun owners, need to take full advantage of that and make sure we vote early. That way you don't have to worry about yet another round of COVID coming up, shutting down everything and making it hard to vote. Do it now. Get it over with. Get your vote in there. Get your family's vote in there. They put that out there. Fine. Let's take full advantage of that and make sure all of our friends, everybody's voted long before November.
That makes sense. Now, obviously, one of the biggest successes that VCDL has had in recent years is the Second Amendment sanctuary movement that you were part of. Amplifying, I guess, would be perhaps the right word for it. But that in that case, more than 90% of the state's counties, including some purplish counties in Northern Virginia, Virginia Beach area, passed resolutions, essentially saying they wouldn't enforce new forms of gun control that they find unconstitutional were they to pass. And so do you think that you can take that momentum from what now has been a year and a half, 2 years, since that sort of grassroots sweep across the state came into play and culminated with your rally, your lobby day in 2020, right before sort of the last big event before everything went crazy over COVID, obviously. Do you think you can recapture that momentum that was built through that movement and apply it to this election? Like how much, with everything that's happened in the intervening times and how much the country has changed, the state has changed with this pandemic and a number of the other things that have happened, rioting and the change in the presidency and all the stuff we've seen in that time period to take people's attention away from this issue. Can you realistically get those same people out to the polls now in this off-year election?
I certainly believe we can, and certainly hope that we can. One of the things that would be on the top of our list, for example, is to get rid of the law that allowed local gun control. Put that back to where it was for the previous 17 years or whatever it was. Put it back to that. To get rid of local gun control. We don't have any of our other civil rights that we divide up that way and say, you're going into Fairfax, so your First Amendment rights don't really apply there the way they do in the rest of the state. We don't do that. It's only guns that we say, that's an exception. We'll let that have. We'll change the law so everywhere you travel, you got to have new rules. That's ridiculous. We need to stop all of that. So that would, I think that we can see some motion on that because that was one of the very things that we were fighting when we had those huge Second Amendment sanctuary movement, the map that's of Virginia that's almost solid green. And if you notice, the localities that have tried to pass local gun control are with the exception of one that's not done anything yet but is looking at it, they're all the ones that were not in the green part of that map. They're part of the 6% or 5% that never said they were a sanctuary and have been the same sort of tyrannical movement on their side to dominate over gun owners and take away their rights in government buildings and parks and everything else. So overall, that sanctuary movement, I think, was very, very good, and I think it's continuing to pay some dividends. Surrey County is the exception to this. They had passed that, but then they had an election and got some new people on their board of supervisors, and so we're keeping an eye on them. So far, they haven't done anything, but they're rumbling about it. And that's a very rural county. Again, none of these localities have any excuse for controlling the rights of law-abiding citizens. And virtually none of them have had any problems in their government buildings, but they do it anyhow just because they can.
Sure. And what do you think a realistic scenario is for the repeal of that law or some of these other gun control laws that got passed, in the 2020 session? How many seats do either pro-gun candidates, or essentially mostly Republicans in this case, need to pick up to actually get something like that through? Like, I imagine you'd need control. Would you need control of all three branches to get that repeal through? What's your view on it?
Well, I think the Republicans would need 6 seats in the House to flip it over to where they're back in control. They could then hopefully pass it, the repeal, and then that would go to the Senate. And there we would be looking at some of the Democrats that have voted and stood with gun owners in some of these issues to stand up on this and say, yeah, this doesn't work. This is a problem. It's now very hard for gun owners to know where they can and can't carry in Virginia compared to where it was. So we're if we can influence, get enough votes there to get it out of the House, then it's a function of who's the governor. If it's a governor that's anti-gun, then they'll veto it, and we won't have any chance of an override in the current configuration. If it's pro-gun, then we could well get the job done.
Although I suppose even McAuliffe has made deals that resulted in pro-gun legislation passing with the concealed carry expansion a few years back after the unilateral attempt by the Attorney General to restrict reciprocity with other states backfired pretty significantly.
Yeah, Herring really misunderestimated that. He's just, his head is, our current Attorney General's head is so strongly set against gun rights. He hates them that, he does things on impulse, I think. But yeah, he did that. And then the backlash on telling Virginia's, well, at the time it was probably, right now we have 700,000 permit holders in this state. Back then, I think it was like 500,000. Still 500,000 that's a lot of people, a lot of voters and stuff. And when he did that, the backlash was so strong that even some of the Democrats were going, we got to do something about this. Yeah. So Herring got thrown under the bus and rolled over a few times. He didn't go to any of the celebration of the signing of that bill, or there were a couple of minor gun control bills that got signed along with it. That was kind of part of the deal. Of course, McAuliffe really touted, what these gun control bills would do, which we were just sort of, kind of yawning. Just briefly mentioned this thing about reciprocity. He did it because he wanted he wanted some kind of a victory on gun control, which he hadn't had, even if it was a very, very minor thing. He's done deals before. I don't know. I certainly wouldn't be counting on any deals. I think, if anything, he's probably gotten a little more radical since in the last 4 years.
So what's your next initiative for this election? What's VCDL up to right now?
Well, we're continuing to educate our members. We're continuing to remind them that elections are November 2nd to get their friends and family out. We'll be pushing again hard to say, go ahead and vote absentee, get your ballots, get those in, do it now, get it over with. We will probably be running a few advocacy ads in the media coming up soon, right before the voting starts. So we're working on things of that nature. Again, it's important for people to understand the history of what's going on, including things that McAuliffe has done. So people sometimes tend to forget, and what he said he's going to be doing in his current. As he's running for office, he's been talking about all kinds of things, assault weapon bans and so forth.
Right.
And we want to make sure people are aware of that.
Certainly. All right. Well, we appreciate you coming on and talking to us a little bit about the suit that you guys are involved with, as well as the upcoming election here in Virginia. I'm actually in Alexandria, Virginia, for anyone who isn't aware of that already, and have experienced the local gun control laws.
My condolences.
It's a wonderful place to live, but certainly
it's a pretty area.
But they're one of the areas that passed the local restrictions that you referred to earlier, and it does have a real world everyday impact on me personally and lots of people who live around here, of course. But yeah, we'll have you back on hopefully again in the future, maybe when the election gets a little bit closer, to give us the inside view of what's happening on the ground in the gun rights movement in the state. So really appreciate you coming on, and we'll talk to you again soon.
All right. Well, thank you, Stephen. Appreciate being on.
All right. I'm here with John Mcadams, who's a Reload member. This is part of our new segment where we talk to some of the Reload members, try to get to know people in our new community here. If you want to join the Reload and become a member yourself, you can head over to thereload.com where you can look at the options to buy a monthly membership or a yearly membership where you actually get 2 months for free. So, John, can you tell us a little bit about your background? How'd you get into guns? Where are you from? That sort of thing. What do you do?
Sure thing, Stephen. First off, it's great being on the podcast. Thanks a lot for having me today. I'm originally from Texas. That's actually where I live now after a long and winding road to kind of take me back here. I grew up with guns. My dad and my grandfather were both big into shooting and hunting as well. And so I started accompanying them afield from a very young age. And my dad was in the Army. He was in law enforcement. I followed him down the Army path. I served 10 years. And so I lived kind of all over the country and hunted in a lot of different places in my time in the military. And so it was something I always enjoyed. And then when I got out of the Army, I decided to go to work for myself, providing a resource that provides kind of a sober, serious, like no baloney look at, okay, this is the information that can really help you getting started or taking your hunting game to the next level, regardless if you want to be hunting deer or going to Africa or hunting elk or something like that.
Wonderful. And now you run a podcast too called the Big Game Hunting Podcast, right?
That's right. Yeah. So I started the Big Game Hunting blog back in 2012, still write for it, and then started the Big Game Hunting podcast in 2019, and that's also still going strong.
And I've actually been on that podcast too. If people want to head over to Apple Podcasts or whatever their favorite podcasting app is to check it out, they totally should. But what made you move from your sort of traditional kinds of hunting that you see in most parts of the country, white-tailed deer and hogs and things like that, into big game? What was that transition like? What motivated it?
Sure. So, like you said, I grew up hunting white-tailed deer in a typical way that a lot of people do. I hunted from a deer stand, and I was kind of waiting for animals to come by, and it was a lot of fun, and I had many really good years doing that. But my time in the military took me to a lot of different places: New York, Kentucky, Georgia, Washington, El Paso. So especially when I went up to Washington, the type of game that they had there was very different. There are white-tailed deer, black-tailed deer, mule deer in Washington, but especially in the eastern part of the state, it's much more open, and it lends itself to a different type of hunting, more of a spot and stalk type approach. where it's much more proactive, where you get up on a knob and you start looking for game yourself. Once you spot it, then you make a move on it and try and get within shooting range. And so it's a much more proactive, more exciting ways to hunt in many cases. And so I really started enjoying that type of hunting. And then when I moved down to El Paso, it really continued. And I hunted in Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, Wyoming, when I lived out in West Texas. And also, as you can imagine, living in the Southwest like that, much more open terrain, you can see really far. Your game densities aren't as high there, but you can see so much farther. And so in many cases, you will spot more game in those type of areas than you would hunting in really thick forest in many places east of the Mississippi. So it was a type of hunting I really enjoyed. The country was beautiful. The game was very interesting and unique, all fun to hunt in their own ways that way. And so to answer your question, it was really kind of just where I lived. And it was one of those things that a lot of people, you see hunting TV shows of people hunting elk and mule deer and whatnot. So I was always curious about it. And so it was really fun to get out there and get a chance to hunt a lot of those animals myself.
No, that's fascinating. I think it's interesting to talk to, hunters like yourself, because I'm not a hunter myself. And I always want to find out why people, engage in the kind of different uses of guns that they do. And this is an area where, first of all, there's a lot of sort of misinformation out there on hunting and conservation and the connection between those two things. And it's also, a lot of people who don't understand the culture of hunting. And so I think it's good to have somebody on who does understand, who does the hunting and all sorts of different game and get your point of view as to why you do this, why you think more people moved into hunting over the last year with the pandemic, right? I mean, there were meat shortages, and there was a lot of your traditional sort of hobbies got shut down. So I guess that moved people into wanting to try hunting for themselves again or for the first time. Have you seen that yourself? Have you noticed that trend? And if so, what do you think that's driving it? Is it those factors, or is there something else going on too?
I think those are the two primary factors that you talked about. With one, just kind of uncertainty of what's going on. You want to get access to your own meat, and on a good year, right? I can go a whole year and not eat any store-bought meat. You shoot a couple deer, you shoot an elk, something like that. You can get several hundred pounds of meat off of a big bull elk, and even more if it's a moose. And there was already kind of a push going that way anyway in the years prior to COVID, where more and more people were starting to take a more interest in where their food was coming from. And, so like I said, there was a lot of people that were just becoming interested in hunting for the meat and food aspects of it. COVID accelerated that with the issues that were going on with the meat factories and just uncertainty of what was going on. And then at the same time, I think people were just looking for something to do last year. You couldn't go to concerts or sporting events or any of that sort of thing. And so one of the things you could do was go spend time outside. So people started hiking, camping, hunting, fishing. And so there were people that came to hunting for the first time for those reasons. And there were also a lot of people that used to hunt for whatever reason that started hunting again in 2020 or 2021 due to a lot of those same factors. I couldn't tell you exactly how many people started hunting, for the first time or kind of returned to it last year. I know that Arizona saw over 20,000 additional applicants from 2019 to 2020 in their antelope and elk draw. And so that's just one state for one draw that they had. So we're talking tremendous numbers of people that have started to do that in the last year. And, traffic to my listeners for my podcast really spiked. Traffic from my blog went through the roof. 2020 was, easily my best year ever as far as traffic goes. And it's continued into 2021. There's so many people want to talk about guns and all of that stuff, especially, that is my focus on the hunting side of things. And my most popular articles were always cartridge comparisons, the 270 versus the 30-06. Which one should you be hunting with for the sort of hunting that you do? And I think there was a lot of people, so that sort of thing. I think there was a lot of people that they wanted to learn how to hunt last year. And they're like, I have no idea where to start. I've heard a 6.5 Creedmoor is really good. Should I buy one of those, or a 30-06 or a 300 Win Mag or whatever? And so a lot of those people, I think, just did Google search for this stuff and found me that way. And so that stuff was extremely popular. And so I've really focused my efforts really in the last year and a half on directing, what it is that I'm producing on the podcast and on the blog to serve those people and what it is that they're looking for and what they need.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense. And so if people want to transition into hunting, and then especially into big game hunting, perhaps for traditional hunters who want to experience something different than what they're used to, obviously they can go to your podcast on either Apple Podcasts or other platforms, and they can read your blog. What other sort of advice would you have for somebody who wants to make that transition?
Sure. So another really good resource that I've put together, especially for a lot of those sort of people that, one, like you said, either want to start hunting for the first time, or they already do some hunting and they want to expand their horizons a little bit, especially on the firearms side of things, is I put together a site called huntingguns101.com, 101. I made a free ebook that people can sign up for, get there, and it talks about specifically what cartridges you need to be looking at to start off with. And that's just, like I said, especially if you don't own a gun, or if you want to go out to hunt elk or something like that. Here's some recommendations on some places to start. And then, if you want, I have, more information that kind of follows on to that to talk about specific rifles that people need to be looking at, optics, ammunition, all of that stuff. And it's one of those things that there's so much nuance in it, just like with everything else in the gun world, that you can really go down a rabbit hole with it. And there's so much garbage and misinformation out there, and people fighting over that this is better than that. I think a lot of people just want some straight, no baloney information on, okay, this is what I want to do. What do I need to do that? And I kind of walk people through analyzing what it is that you're going to be hunting, where you're going to be hunting it, what your budget's like, what you want as a person, how big you are, just what you think is cool, and then use all those things to decide what you need, and then make some recommendations on what it is that would be best for you to be using out there.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful. That's part of the reason I want to do this segment, is try to get to see what the Reload members are doing in the gun community. These aren't ads, but I think it's interesting to hear about some of the work that you guys are doing inside of the gun community, and to reach out to newcomers or to people who are curious, about different aspects of gun culture in America. And in fact, it sounds like you have very similar sort of motivation to what I do with the Reload, which is trying to get at that sober, serious look at different aspects of gun culture and gun politics and gun policy, except you're applying it specifically to hunting. So what was it? Just the last question here before we wrap up. What was it that appealed to you about the Reload? Is it that approach that sort of brought you in, or was there more to it than that?
No, you're definitely right. One, the fact that you were a gun owner and you clearly knew what you were talking about writing in your articles, even before you started the Reload. I was familiar with some of your work elsewhere, and I followed you on Twitter, specifically for your coverage of a lot of things. And you clearly knew what you're talking about, and you looked at it through a different lens than what I was seeing elsewhere. I don't need hysteria or any of that stuff about anything. And really, a lot of the coverage on guns really leans very hard one way or another, I've found. And I don't want a political activist telling me what the deal is with this new gun law. I want to know, one, what the heck it means first. And so the fact that you know what you're talking about and you're able to kind of thread the needle that way is very appealing to me. And the fact that you have unique coverage on that goes more in depth into the gun news and gun culture than I get elsewhere. Anything about guns, it seems like you read about it on CNN or even Fox News or something like that. It has a very shallow approach to doing things. It's just like 1 inch thick, and whereas you can kind of dive into more detail on just what the heck all this stuff means. For instance, you you recently published an article talking about what this new Texas abortion law could mean as far as potential avenues for gun control going forward that I hadn't even considered until I read that. And
Right.
you had an interview. It might have been David French that you were talking about with this, about the Supreme Court case with New York concealed carry.
Mhm.
Here's some things that are like actually likely to happen, depending on how the Supreme Court decides. And I had never run into any sort of analysis like that before, and so I really appreciated that.
No, wonderful. Yeah, it's always important, I think, to try and get some of that feedback and see what people are really enjoying about the site. And that is some of the stuff that I'm most proud of personally for what we do, trying to offer a deeper understanding of what's going on and a less hysterical one, I guess you could say. And also trying to talk to regular people inside the community like yourself who give us some insight into what gun owners, what big game hunters in this case are actually like, instead of hearing caricatures of them, elsewhere, or just allusions to who they are. I think that's a really important thing as well. And so if people want to join, again, head over to the Reload. And if you want to be featured in this segment as a Reload member, just make sure you respond to the member's email. Let me know, and we'll make it happen. I find this one of the best segments so far, personally, because I enjoy talking with you guys, getting to know some of the members a little bit better. But yes, thank you for coming on, John. People should go and check out your podcast, the Big Game Hunting Podcast, on Apple Podcasts and everywhere else. So thank you so much for your time, and we will talk to another member another time.
Thanks a lot. It was a pleasure being on.
And that's all we've got for this week's episode of the Weekly Reload podcast. Tune in again next week for more gun stuff. In the meantime, make sure you check out thereload.com and become a member. You'll get exclusive access to lots of posts, lots of analysis, including my look at what's ahead for the ATF director position and what President Biden might do now that he has pulled his favored nominee from consideration. And you'll also get this podcast a day early before everyone else. It's wonderful, wonderful benefit. Anyway, that's all we got. So I will see you again next time.
I made the devil run. I gave him poison just for fun. I had one friend, now there's none. I made the devil run. I broke so many bones, but none of them were